In 1982, Marvel released their first limited series featuring a host of superheroes gathered together by a celestial power. That's right, it's Marvel Superheroes
Contest of Champions.
That's right, it's Marvel Superheroes Secret
Contest
Wars.
of Champions.
No, it's not
Secret
Contest
Wars.
of Champions, it's Secret
Contest
Wars.
of Champions.
Right, fine, Marvel Superheroes Contest of Champions. On the inside rear cover of Spider-Man vs. Hulk at the Winter Olympics, we were promised the greatest ever event, Marvel Superheroes at the Summer Olympics. After Spider-Man vs. Hulk, that wasn't a very enticing prospect. But as it would happen, global events meant that comic would never see the light of day. Time to get serious. On Christmas Eve 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan to strengthen the rule of the Communist Party there, after the Afghan president, and communist, was assassinated. In response, US President Jimmy Carter issued an ultimatum. If Soviet troops did not withdraw from Afghanistan within 1 month, the United States would boycott the 1980 Summer Olympics due to be held in Moscow. The USSR didn't withdraw, so the United States, along with 64 other countries, did. So what? The United States aren't attending the Olympics, but their heroes are? I'm afraid not. That was that. The story had been written, some of the art had been completed, but Marvel Superheroes at the Summer Olympics would never be released. 2 years later, Marvel had an idea. The story could be rewritten to remove references to the Olympics. The art could be adapted for the same purpose, and also to update some characters that had changed since 1980. There would be one further change. Rather than a one-off special, the story would now form the basis of Marvel's first ever limited series, the 3-issue Contest of Champions. I think that's an appropriate cover for the first issue of your first limited series. The writing team on this one is the same as Spider-Man vs. the Hulk, but don't let that put you off, because they do a much better job this time round. If you're not familiar with that car crash, the team consists of Captain America's Mark Gruenwald, toy specialist Bill Mantlow, he wrote ROM and Micronauts, and Punisher's Stephen Grant. It was Bill Mantlow who reworked the story to move it away from the Olympic theme. Art, well, originally it was all John Romita Jr.'s work, but Bob Layton came on board to adapt and update some of the characters that had changed since 1980, and in the case of one of them, change her completely. He is best known for his work on Iron Man from the 70s up to the noughties, the earliest adventures of Hercules, and issues 4 and 5 of the original Secret Wars. As for John Romita Jr., he's been producing work for Marvel for over 40 years now, including stints on the Uncanny X-Men, Daredevil the Man Without Fear during Frank Miller's writing period, and has become synonymous with Spider-Man after penciling countless issues of that character. You want to see a comic featuring every superhero on Earth? Let's do it!
Page 1 is a splash page, and it's a collage of various superheroes' faces, and we see our 2 antagonists. One of them says, "We are agreed then that Earth, having the greatest concentration of super champions in this star sector, shall provide us with our pawns." And the other one says, "Agreed, for mighty must the players be in a contest where the stakes are life and death. To Earth, challenger, let the game begin." And that's it. You have your setup straight away in just 2 speech bubbles. Now that is efficient. On Earth, we join the Avengers, who are having a training session, and Hank McCoy, who has recently joined the Defenders, but of course has in the past been an Avenger, is visiting them, and there's a little bit of banter going on, and he says, "Rusty, me, I'll make you a deal. If I can go against all 6 of you for 1 minute, will you apologise and come upstairs and party with me?" They accept the challenge, and we see the likes of Wonderman, Captain America, Iron Man, etc. They're all trying to get a hold of him as he ricochets around the room. Then, just as they seem to have him pinned, they close in on him, and there's a shimmer, and they vanish. This isn't a one-off event, nor is it confined solely to the United States, because next thing we know, we're in Russia, and we see the Red Ghost, sadly without his super apes. And just as he's talking through his latest scheme to bring Russia to its knees, the Soviet super soldiers burst through the wall. There's a brief skirmish, and mainly thanks to Darkstar's power, they seem to have him under control. Again, like the Avengers, they close in, but as they get close to him, again, they vanish. We return to the United States, where we see the same thing happen to the Fantastic Four as they're attending some kind of gala dinner evening. In Canada, Alpha Flight go missing. Back in America, we see the X-Men vanish. In New York, there are several characters that vanish. Power Man and Iron Fist, Spider-Man, Dazzler, Hellcat and Valkyrie, all gone. And on it goes, as we see a variety of characters, heroes, all vanishing the same way. We see the Eternals vanish. We see Sunfire vanish in Japan. And then we see two other characters disappear. And this is a bit of a slip. It's Captain Britain and the Black Knight. And it says here, elsewhere, England suddenly finds itself bereft of the crimson-costumed Captain Britain and his companion, the Black Knight. Now here's the issue. As I've already said, they did put work in to update some of these costumes and even change a character, since this was originally due to be released in 1980. The problem is, Captain Britain and the Black Knight, they were on a particular mission, quest, in 1980. So that's obviously where this has come from. But this is now 1982, and that quest is a thing of the past. Now you could argue, oh yeah, but it may not be that they're on that quest, they're just kind of hanging out together. Yeah, maybe. But the problem is that Captain Britain is wearing his original red costume. Now this is 1982 that this was released, and he hadn't worn the red costume since 1981. It's in 1981 that he changed to the blue outfit, but the thing is, that costume didn't make its debut in America until 1985. So they put a lot of effort into making sure the costumes and characters were up to date for this comic. That's one slip they made. I'm not really sure, to be honest, how they could have got around that, because as I've said, those two characters were doing that mission in 1980. But anyway, the costume's wrong. It's out of date. And on it goes until we see this great double-page splash of all of the heroes in this massive, well, it's a stadium, isn't it? It was supposed to be the Olympic Stadium originally, and it still kind of resembles a stadium. And although we saw a lot of these characters vanish, there are still more here that we didn't see vanish. One thing that happens quite a bit in this series is characters meet for the first time, like well-known characters meet for the first time, which is incredible because they all seem to have known each other these days forever. At this point, there are a lot of reunions, such as Wolverine and Alpha Flight, or Iceman and Darkstar, who talk about their time together on the Champions. Shamrock, who we'll get to later, meets Captain Britain for the first time, and of course they hate each other, because Britain Island. It's that simple. Of course, Marvel's biggest brains are there, and they are pondering over who is behind these events. Doctor Strange, Mr. Fantastic, Tony Stark, Professor X are there trying to work it out. But as they are, the Grand Master makes his grand entrance, and he explains what's going on. The rest of the population of Earth are in suspended animation, and they will remain that way unless the heroes play along with his game. And what is his game? Well, simply put, the Grand Master is playing a game to win back the life of his brother, the Collector. So for this, he has a team of heroes, and he selects 12 from the masses. His opponent, the Unknown, also has a team of 12 heroes, again selected from the masses. The Unknown explains that there is a globe of life which is split into 4 quarters, and the 4 quarters are sent around the planet. It's then down to the 2 teams to challenge each other, to compete, and to collect as many quarters of this globe as possible. If the Grandmaster's team collects the most parts, then the collector will be returned to life. If the unknown wins, then the Grandmaster will pay the ultimate price, his life. And at that point, with the two teams assembled and the rules of the game in place, the contest of champions can truly begin.
On to issue 2 and the beginning of the contest proper. One of the featured heroes in this issue is She-Hulk. Originally it was supposed to be Ms. Marvel, but since Rogue absorbed her powers in 1981's Avengers Annual issue 10, she had to be replaced. Up stepped the Jade Giantess.
Naturally, we have to get our obligatory catch-up out of the way before this issue properly begins. Before, in fact, the greatest competition of all begins. And what a beginning. We have this double-page spread showing the first two teams squaring off against each other in the frozen north. And remember, this is a series in which a lot of characters meet each other for the first time. And we have our first meeting like that here, as Iron Fist meets the Invisible Girl for the very first time. Much further down the scale, this is also the first meeting between Daredevil and Darkstar, in case you were wondering. We have our first pun of the series, as Iron Fist describes Sunfire as a hothead, because Sunfire flies off and wants to work solo, not as part of a team. And this is a recurring theme that we'll get throughout this series. Obviously, it's just a MacGuffin, so we see one hero squaring off against another. I have always liked Sunfire, despite his rather odd mask. I think he's a pretty cool character, although he doesn't really seem like a bundle of laughs to hang around with. And who does Sunfire square off against? Well, it's Darkstar. And that results in a visually striking battle between the two, as Darkstar uses her dark force, and of course Sunfire uses his fire. Meanwhile, the Invisible Girl and Iron Fist end up splitting up, and she comments, "This is so unlike working with the Fantastic Four." I assume she's referring to the lack of arguing. She wanders off and finds the hero Talisman, who was created especially for this series. He's an Australian Aboriginal character, and he has a bull roarer. And it does seem that Marvel like giving their Aboriginal Australians bull roarers, much like Gateway got one in the X-Men. This whole round of the battle, if you like, is given 12 whole pages. So we've got the Invisible Girl against Talisman. We know we've got Darkstar against Sunfire, so that leaves two characters. And we see Daredevil facing off against Iron Fist. Now, isn't that a prospect? And again, it's actually the first time these characters ever met. The fight itself should be awesome, shouldn't it? But this is in the days before Matt Murdock was a ninja. He had his boxing abilities, and of course he was very agile and a good fighter, but he wasn't quite the character he ended up being. So overall the fight doesn't quite deliver as much as we'd like it to. Whilst Iron Fist honours his opponent, Daredevil tries something very dishonourable and tries to launch a sneak attack, which ultimately fails. Would he do that, Daredevil? Would he do something so dishonest and underhand? I suppose he's a lawyer. Elsewhere, the last time we saw Darkstar and Sunfire, she had grabbed him in a fist of her Dark Force energy. He now breaks free of that using his atomic fire. But the explosion that ensues from that begins to break up the ice around all the competitors. Now, whilst this actually affects all the heroes to differing degrees, Daredevil actually senses the quarter of the globe of life that they're all searching for. So he makes his way towards it. Invisible Girl sees this, and simultaneously, it seems, all the other heroes see what's going on, and everyone makes a break for the quarter of the globe of life. Sue Storm thinks she's got to it first, but just as she approaches it, Daredevil defies the laws of physics by grabbing hold of it with his billy club. And that means it's 1-0 to the Grandmaster's team. So we move on to the next contest, and this group of heroes are in a Wild West setting. Now we've got a real A-lister here in the form of Iron Man, but then it kind of goes downhill from there on. We've got a B-lister with She-Hulk, a C-lister with Captain Britain, and then we go further down the alphabet for the remaining characters. We have Sabra, who has made a couple of appearances before, and two characters created especially for this series, Defensor from South America and the Arabian Knight. The Arabian Knight was actually created for this series, but because of the 2-year delay, he had already made his publication debut in issue 257 of The Incredible Hulk the previous year. It's unfortunate that an Arabian character is called the Arabian Knight and wears a turban with a jewel at the front, carries a scimitar, that kind of thing. It's all a bit stereotypical, but I suppose it could be worse. Oh, there you go. He travels around on a flying carpet. Oh my God. Oh well, different times. Similar to Captain Britain and Shamrock instantly hating each other because of the political climate of the time, the Arabian Knight and Sabra, who is from Israel, instantly hate each other, even though they're on the same team. At the other end of the scale, we have Defensor laying on the charm with She-Hulk. As you can imagine, it doesn't get him very far. And we have Captain Britain, who meets, well, everyone for the first time. It was still early in his career, especially early in his career in American comics. And up to this point, he had only met Spider-Man in a couple of issues of Marvel Team Up and Captain America. And his team up with Captain America was in the British weekly Captain Britain comic, which wouldn't have been seen in America. All the heroes then split up, and She-Hulk quickly takes out Arabian Knight before moving on to tussle with Sabra. Defensor has the temerity to take on Iron Man, and it does seem that She-Hulk is hovering in her battle with Sabra, so maybe this is still the redone artwork that originally had Ms. Marvel in this comic. Arabian Knight faces his second defeat, this time at the hands of Captain Britain, and he then goes on to take on Sabra, unsuccessfully. This round ends with She-Hulk taking on Iron Man. Now, she's already butted heads with both the Arabian Knight and Defensor over gender politics, and now it's Iron Man's turn to say something that she finds insulting and condescending. Must be the time of the month. He then stuns her with a repulsor blast, a bit too easily if you ask me. But then, I guess, Ms. Marvel, whilst he checks that she's okay, the Arabian Knight, already twice defeated of course, tiptoes past him and grabs the quarter of the Globe of Life for the Unknowns team to level the series. Who's a loser now, eh? The score is 1-1.
It's even Stevens as we move into the third and final issue of the series. Who will win? Will it be a draw? There's only one way to find out.
After another quick recap, it's time for contest number 3. And we've got a good lineup in this one, with only one new character, La Peregrine. He's French. And again, fantastic scenery. Where the teams are concerned, for the Unknown, we have Vanguard, Angel and Black Panther. And on the Grand Masters team, we have, of course, La Peregrine, but we also have another two characters, and this is the best meeting yet, in the whole series, in fact, of two well-known characters. It's the first time that the Thing meets Wolverine. And the Thing says, "You're one of those new X-Men, ain't you?" Before, naturally, they go their separate ways. And now we finally find out where we are. We're in China, because the Black Panther is walking around amongst the terracotta warriors. They were a very big find in the late 70s, early 80s, always on TV. And as he's walking around, he comments on the fact that his senses detect an unfamiliar scent. That's right, it's another first meeting. It's the first meeting between him and Wolverine. Although it has to be said, Wolverine's claws look a little bit cylindrical for my liking. Meanwhile, Le Peregrine squares off against Angel, of course. And Angel is a bit miffed that Le Peregrine seems to be outmaneuvering him. And it prompts him to comment, "Me, the guy who practically invented the idea of the winged superhero? Don't tell Hawkman." Then we see the Thing facing off against Vanguard. I've said before that I was never a fan of old school Thing.
He was just too miserable a character for my liking. But he's absolutely fine in this. I have no issues with him. I think this was the beginning of the change. So he was less of an ornery character, as he was so fond of saying. But he still had attitude, which was good. And after the Thing's attack is repelled by Vanguard's hammer and sickle, Vanguard explains, "I am the foremost hero of the Soviet state, and my weapons turn the aggressive might of an enemy back upon him." And the Thing comes out with a great line in response. "Then they'd better start working overtime, Red, because I'm as aggressive as they come." Back to the Black Panther and Wolverine. And as most of us would have guessed by now, Wolverine is taking the competition a little bit too seriously. Angel eventually overcomes Le Peregrine, as it should be, and the Thing does indeed overcome Vanguard. After that skirmish, he wanders off and finds Wolverine and the Black Panther. And he's a bit annoyed because he can see that Wolverine is taking it far too seriously and it's just a competition. And there's a great little exchange between the two of them where the Thing says, "Half pint, it's too bad you and me are teammates. Yours is one butt I'd like to boot from here to boys." And Wolverine says, "Anytime you'd like to try it, Rockhead." They then all end up working together. Surely that's against the rules. As Wolverine and Black Panther scent the quarter of the globe of life, Black Panther points to the part of the ground where he believes it's buried, and the Thing smashes his way through the ground to recover the quarter. So the score now is Grandmaster 2, the Unknown 1, with one contest left to go. That final and controversial contest is in a jungle in South America between the pretty good team of Captain America, Sasquatch and Blitzkrieg, and the pretty poor team of Storm and two new characters, the Collective Man and Shamrock with her good luck powers. Oh, no doubt she's also got the gift of the gab from kissing the Blarney Stone, so she has. It's funny really, if they wanted an international flavour, they could have just replaced a lot of these new characters with the all new, all different X-Men. You could have had Nightcrawler instead of Blitzkrieg. You could have had Banshee instead of Shamrock. Speaking of new characters, all three of these did go on to make subsequent appearances. And in fact, the Collective Man is another character like the Arabian Night who actually made his debut before this series because of the delay. And that was in Hulk issue 250 in 1980. Naturally, we have Shamrock coming out with that comic book cliche for Irish people as she exclaims, "Begorra!" I have never heard an Irish person say that. I'm just grateful that they didn't have the Collective Man saying something like, "Ah, so." So on one team we have Captain America, and he is meeting for the first time a stupidly large Sasquatch, and Blitzkrieg, who is German. And Blitzkrieg quickly takes his leave of the other two. And Captain America says he's off, levitating on a field of electrically charged particles. Thanks for explaining. Then he and Sasquatch go their separate ways. And I know this is a bit of a MacGuffin so that we all get to see heroes fighting each other on their own. But out of all of these characters, surely Captain America could have got them to work as a team. And the writers kind of chuck in a little thought bubble from him saying, "So much for teamwork." But there you go. That is the nature of this series, I suppose. Battle commences with Blitzkrieg taking on Storm and Captain America squaring off against the more Irish, or should I say more Irish than a potato, Shamrock. And the writers have given us some really corny dialogue. "'Tis lucky I am that me costume blends with the foliage." Incredible. And then when he first encounters her, he says, "Where in blazes did you come from?" To which she replies, "Sunny Island." Now I know the writer hasn't been there. Sasquatch is struggling with the humidity of the jungle when he comes across the Collective Man, whose powers I'm struggling to really nail down. He can split himself into clones of himself, but he can also channel the energy, the abilities of every person in China through his body, and he does that
to kick off Sasquatch and win their little battle. Blitzkrieg, meanwhile, has been defeated by Storm, who hardly features in this whatsoever. And he meets up with Captain America, who temporarily has been split from Shamrock. Finally, they work together, hurrah. Blitzkrieg goes searching for the ore, which somehow he finds using his electricity type powers. And although Captain America leaps for it, luckily Shamrock was closer to it, so she nips down and plucks it out of the hole in the tree where it's nestled. And because she's on the Unknown's team, the score is level at, final score, Grandmaster 3, Unknown 1. And here we have it. This is the biggest issue with this whole series. It's a fun story, but the writers stuffed it up. For some reason, they lost track of who was on what team, and when the Unknown's team won their little battle, they actually ascribed it to the Grandmaster's team. The teams of heroes rematerialise back on the orbiting space stadium. The Grandmaster is there, the Unknown is there, and so are all of the other heroes that were originally abducted at the beginning of this series. The Grandmaster has won. He claims his prize. He takes all 4 quarters of the globe. He promises he will never again use the Earth as a pawn in his games. And he begins to reassemble the globe of life. And he says, as soon as I join the 4 components, the power to resurrect my immortal brother, the Collector, shall be mine. The Unknown comes out with a bit of an obscure, bit of a vague response to that, which is, that is right, Grandmaster. The power and the choice to use it will be yours. The Grandmaster ponders this, it says he ponders it, and so do a lot of the heroes present. All of the heroes are beginning to get curious about the identity of the Unknown. The Invisible Girl, with help from Talisman, sneaks up and pulls back the hood of the Unknown to reveal the face of death. There was more to the game than the Grandmaster realised. Yes, he can bring his brother, the Collector, back to life. But the only way really to do so, even with the Orb of Life, is for the Grandmaster to swap places with the Collector. Of course, he agrees to do this. The Grandmaster fades away and the Collector is reborn. The Collector quickly realises what's happened and is furious with death. And he promises, even if he has to use every hero in the cosmos, he will defeat him. Death quite likes the sound of that. And the pair of them walk off together, discussing the possibility of a new game, of a new contest. Then all of the heroes are sent back to Earth to the precise points that they were taken from, albeit an hour later. An hour, is that all? Anyway, this does of course mean that the Beast won his bet. He did last 60 seconds, more than 60 seconds, against the Avengers. And then they will stand there and look up at the skies and ponder what they've been through. And he says it's going to be a long time before he feels like playing games again. And that's that.
How on earth did they manage to screw that up so badly? A landmark event, Marvel's first ever limited series, and they, the writers, the editors, fluffed the ending. Fluffed or otherwise, that was the end of the story, with all characters returned to the exact spot they were taken from with just 1 hour of time elapsed. That meant that unlike future events, this storyline had absolutely no effect on the characters' continuities. Even when I first got into reading comics as a kid, 1 or 2 years after this event, it was never referred to or referenced in any of the titles I read. Compare that with the constant references to the Beyonder and the event of Secret Wars that cropped up time and time again decades after that event ended. I had never even heard of the series until I discovered it on the internet in the 2000s. When I first read it, I was excited, expecting another Secret Wars. But I was left disappointed and borderline angry at what I saw as an outdated, cheesy and lightweight adventure. I threw it into a drawer and cursed my wasted money. But then something odd happened. I read it again. This time, knowing the type of story it was, I approached it with different expectations. And I enjoyed it. I read it again. And again. Each time getting more out of it. Outdated, cheesy, lightweight. Yes, it was all those things. But it was something else. Entertaining. But then came the biggest bombshell of all. Issue 3 of the Contest of Champions was not the end of the saga. 5 years after the original contest came to an end, the storyline was picked up by Steve Engelhart and Tom DeFalco, and it was overseen by Mark Gruenwald, our old friend. And this all happened in the second West Coast Avengers Annual. Steve Engelhart had worked on a number of issues of Batman and Green Lantern for DC, Exo-Man of War for Valiant, and a whole pile of other titles for various other publishers, not least of all Marvel, for whom he had substantial runs on Captain America, Silver Surfer, the Fantastic Four, and both East and West Coast Avengers. The man holding the pencil and the ink pen for this one is the one and only Al Milgrom. So, 5 years have passed. How is the storyline revived?
This issue begins rather unconventionally as we join our heroes taking part in the annual Bi-Coastal Avengers baseball game. And it is an annual event. The first one occurred in the previous year's Avengers and West Coast Avengers annuals. And of course, they're all wearing their superhero costumes, although surely the likes of Thor's costume isn't the most practical for playing baseball. Hank Pym is there, and at this point in his history, he is just plain old Hank Pym. He didn't have a code name, he didn't really have any powers, although he did have a selection of gadgets that could grow and shrink. But he was still a member of the West Coast Avengers at this point. Wonderman pitches to Thor, and Thor hits the ball, obviously not with a baseball bat. Why would he? He uses his hammer. The ball flies as you'd expect it to and smashes a small hole in the roof of the stadium. However, that hole is soon enlarged by the Silver Surfer, who makes a very dramatic entrance. What is it with superheroes and glass? He explains that one of the elders of the universe wants to kill the Avengers. As he finishes explaining this, the wackos, as they're being called, that's the West Coast Avengers, notice that the ecos, you can guess who they are all dead. I mean, actually dead. What a way to start an annual. Well, that and the baseball game, obviously. At this point, I've got to say, Al Milgrom's art is very hit and miss. I mean, look at this illustration of Hawkeye. It's just a bit weird. I'm not sure what's going on with his mouth. But then you compare that with 2 pages later, this incredible illustration of the Collector. It's like it's by 2 different people. The Silver Surfer then explains that although the Grandmaster is dead, as we know from the Contest of Champions series, he believes he can bring himself back to life. And if he can do that, he can also bring their friends, the Ecos, back to life. Not only that, but the Silver Surfer knows where the Collector's ship is, and he obviously is the key to finding the Grandmaster. So the Silver Surfer leads the wackos to the Collector's ship. When they find the Collector, he explains to them that the Grandmaster has offered Death the Avengers as a way of buying his way out of Death's domain. The only way the West Coast Avengers can help their friends is also by dying and going to Death's domain. And he offers them all a poison to help them do this. What a helpful guy. A couple of them point out the fact that he's a baddie, but others amongst them say, well, yeah, he was, but not since we saved him, since we helped him out. So we now trust him. Ultimately, they all decide to take the potion, and all of them do die, including the Silver Surfer, but not including everyone's favourite Avenger, Espirita. And she demands to know why she hasn't died. I demand to know why she hasn't died as well. The freshly dead and clearly horrified East Coast Avengers arrive in Death's domain, and straight away they meet up with the Grandmaster. And he explains to them that actually it's the Collector who has made a deal with Death, and that deal is to deliver the West Coast Avengers to Death in exchange for immortality. He says that he brought the East Coast Avengers there so they could capture the West Coast Avengers after they entered Death's realm, but before Death got to them. and that actually he, the Grandmaster, can restore all of them to life. Enter the even more freshly dead West Coast Avengers, and the Grandmaster finishes off his little explanation as to what's going on, what needs to happen, by saying, "Here they come already, and if I know the Collector, he's told them some fairy tale to keep them occupied here until death comes. You must subdue them, or their lives will be lost beyond recall." What? What? That makes no sense. So they've just got to fight them? They're going to be there to be kept occupied until death comes, so they've got to fight them. Well, that'll keep them occupied, won't it? Until death comes. The West Coast Avengers see the East Coast Avengers and believe that the Grandmaster has turned them against them. And the East Coast Avengers, I guess, just believe that story that the Grandmaster told them. But you know what this means? Fight! The most powerful hero there, the Silver Surfer, says he has thought of another way to deal with this situation. So he leaves them all and flies off to pursue whatever course of action that is. And that leaves the rest of them to pair off against each other so we can get a proper look at them in action. First up, it's Iron Man in his red and silver suit against Captain Marvel. And by that, we mean Monica Rambeau, a genuinely powerful hero. And this is a great fight that seesaws one way and then the other, and it's all very energy based. Then Mockingbird, who similarly to Captain Marvel made her debut in a Spider-Man comic, takes on Captain America. And Hawkeye says, let's be honest, what we're all thinking. "Bobby, are you out of your mind? Keep clear of Cap." Unsurprisingly, Cap wins, although it is in a bit of a lame way, as basically her clothing snags on some thorns. We then see what it is that Silver Surfer wanted to do. He's gone directly to Death herself, and he wants to reason with her. He does a lot of talking, she says nothing, and then he sees her face, and it gives him the urge to scream. We don't know if he does, because we don't actually see him again now until the very last page of this comic. Hank Pym beats Wasp, not for the first time, and then we move on to a truly heavyweight contest. Thor versus Wonderman. Now you remember in the Contest of Champions, the battle between, say, Iron Fist and Daredevil left a lot to be desired. It didn't live up to what it should have been. This more than makes up for that. It's a real dynamic battle, packed full of sound effects. Wonderman mentions the fact that he's got a new costume for the second time in this comic. He's obviously proud of it, and when you see his previous costumes, you can understand why. But look at these words, it's incredible. Although I'm not quite sure what cram is supposed to be. I guess they just ran out of onomatopoeias. Ultimately, it is a mighty hammer blow from Thor that finishes the contest. And it's worth pointing out at this point that all three Prime Avengers, as they're known, have won. From here, we move on to not exactly two A-listers. It's Tigra and Dr Druid. I was never really into Tigra growing up. There's too much of that forced sexiness about her. And Dr Druid, I didn't like him. He just looks evil. He tries to use illusions to win the battle, but her heightened cat sense of smell means that she can see through them. Ultimately, he uses mind control to win the contest. Next up, it's two knights. It's the always popular Moon Knight against the Black Knight. And they start out by discussing whether or not Moon Knight is actually a member of the West Coast Avengers. Moon Knight says he is, Black Knight isn't sure. Well, Moon Knight's right. He joined in issue 21 of the West Coast Avengers, and this came out after issue 24. But this is a nice little bit of hand-to-hand combat. At one point, Black Knight shouts out, "You talk like a madman." No, he doesn't. What he does do is he pulls off the classic amateur dramatic trick of pretending that he's been stabbed by the Black Knight's sword, when actually what he's really done is he's stuck it under his armpit. Classic. Anyway, that trick catches the Black Knight off guard, and then Moon Knight uses his Ankh to just knock him out basically, and he wins. Then we move on to our last battle of this issue. It's Hawkeye versus She-Hulk. Obviously these two have very different power sets, but at the end of the day he outsmarts She-Hulk. He wins his battle, and that means that the wackos win the overall battle, and they return to the Grandmaster to tell him of the result. They of course are waiting for him to now return them all to life, because that's what they believed was going to happen. But he's kind of ignoring them, and Wonderman points out that it looks like he's waiting for something, and then we find out what, because death then materializes. And the Grandmaster is thrilled with this. He says, "Death, my plan has succeeded. I've got what I wanted all along, a way to get the Dark Lady involved. And now, thanks to the Avengers, the Grandmaster wins the universe." And there, in the background, flying in, as promised, is the Silver Surfer. This annual draws to a close, and if we want to know how the story ends, we have to look at another annual.
Okay, so despite everything, our heroes are all still standing, although technically speaking, they are dead. To see what the Grandmaster's plan is, we have to follow the storyline to Avengers Annual number 16. This was written by Tom DeFalco, with art by, well, various people really. There are no less than 6 people providing pencils and breakdowns, and another 6 providing inks and finishes. If you're wondering what the difference is between pencils and breakdowns, it's really just a matter of detail. If you were doing breakdowns, you would rough out the characters' positions, the composition of the panels, that kind of thing. And then the person providing finishes would come along and add the detail and also the inks. It was a useful way for new artists to learn techniques from older, more experienced artists. And just look at that Bob Layton cover. It's fantastic. It's got everything on it that you want from a comic book. How could you see that on a shelf and not want to buy it, not want to read it? How can you not want to review it instantaneously? Well, review, come on, get on with it.
Oh, okay. Keep your hair on, what you've got left of it. Grandmaster, Death, Silver Surfer, Ecos, Wackos, I've got to stop saying that. They're all there. Initially, the Avengers, who can fly, attempt to take on the Grandmaster, but he bats them away because he's now more powerful than ever before, because he has absorbed the power of death. That was always his plan. From there, we launch into, of course, a recap. But it's not just a recap of the West Coast Avengers Annual, it's a recap of this whole kind of mini history, if you like, of the Contest of Champions. We have a little flashback to that contest, and we see they've done their homework. We see Wolverine taking on Black Panther, as he did. We see Thing taking on Vanguard, as he did. And we see Iron Man taking on Defensor, although, whoops, Iron Man's in his red and silver armour. The recap has a bit of a twist to it, a bit of a slant, because now, and this is the Grandmaster that's recounting this recap, he says that he willingly lost the Contest of Champions so that he could surrender to death and then study death. So he intentionally lost. I think that's their attempt to explain the fudged result of the Contest of Champions. I admire them trying to do that, but it doesn't really work, does it? Because it doesn't explain why the heroes there, why none of them said, I think you'll find it's a draw. Nonetheless, that's the explanation we are given. And then he then explains about bringing the East Coast and West Coast Avengers into Death's realm to battle it out, to distract Death. And whilst Death was distracted, he threw some little energy bands around Death and captured her, as was always his plan. Now he wants to play a new game, because that's it, he won that. He got what he wanted, he won that game. So now he wants to play a game which is for the life of an infinite number of worlds. He has created 5 life bombs. and he instantaneously sends them to the furthest corners of the universe. And one by one, they'll all go off, destroy the universe, and result in a new Big Bang. Captain America says, "We challenge you to give us a sporting chance." It's the Grandmaster. He likes games. Cap is hoping that they'll play one last game for the fate of the entire universe. Of course, the Grandmaster is up for that. So he says, "Yes, we'll do that. You have your team, the combined Avengers team. And here is my team, the Legion of the Unliving, a group of deceased heroes and villains currently residing in Death's domain. The heroes will attempt to find and destroy the life bombs. The Legion of the Unliving, who are now fighting on behalf of the Grandmaster, will attempt to defeat the heroes. Simple rules with the life of the entire universe at stake. Thus, all participants vanish and are sent to the 5 corners of the universe where the life bombs have been sent. The first battle we catch up with, we've got art from John Romita Jr. and finishes from Bill Sienkiewicz. It's Hawkeye, Thor and Hank Pym. Their opponents are Nighthawk, early Avengers member the Swordsman, and the Executioner. There's some good stuff here. The battle between the Executioner and Thor, yeah, that's fine. That's decent enough. Some good stuff between Hawkeye and the Swordsman. One using the bow and arrows, the other using the sword, of course. And even the least interesting pair-up, which is Nighthawk and Hank Pym, has some fantastic silhouette work. And look at that. What a shocking ending to their battle. So we've lost Hank Pym. However, Thor and Hawkeye both win their battles. They find the life bomb, and Thor traps it in a vortex of wind to destroy it. But it's at the cost of his own life. Next up, we have Captain Marvel, remember Monica Rambeau, She-Hulk, Moon Knight and Tigra is our team. The enemies here, got a couple of classics. First we have Drax the Destroyer. We all love him from the Guardians of the Galaxy films, don't we, eh? Well, this isn't really him. We have Captain Marvel, the original Captain Marvel, Captain Marvel, if you like. And we also have a classic villain, the Green Goblin. There's some great action sequences in this pairing of teams. Initially, Monica Rambeau changes to her light form and whizzes off to get the life bomb, which they can see hovering above the water. However, the original Captain Marvel and Drax the Destroyer both possess the ability to absorb energy, which is at this moment in time exactly what she is, and they both hit her from either side to try to absorb her out of existence. Moon Knight is facing off against the Green Goblin. Now, Norman Osborn famously died in issue 122 of The Amazing Spider-Man, and his son Harry Osborn died in issue 200 of The Spectacular Spider-Man. So who is this one? Because clearly this person is dead. Both of those people turned out not to be dead. Anyway, I know, retcon, all that kind of thing. So he takes on Moon Knight. I say he takes him on, he defeats him. I say he defeats him, he kills him. Kills him with one of his finger blasts. When it comes to the Green Goblin's finger blasts, they just don't look that deadly. Maybe it's the sparkles. At the same time, Tigra has won kind of her battle with Death Adder, but in doing so, she got caught by Death Adder and his poisons. So those poisons are working through her body. She-Hulk, although she was getting the better of Drax, eventually he cannoned into her back, breaking her back, and we can even hear her back break. That leaves Captain Marvel, Monica. She does find the life bomb, and she does destroy it, hurrah. However, she then sees that She-Hulk and Tigra have both died, and we know that Moon Knight's died. And at that point, the original Captain Marvel, Green Goblin and Drax the Destroyer hit her from all sides. It isn't entirely clear within this story, but again, she dies. I must mention, by the way, the art in this section is by Keith Pollard and Al Williamson. And I've mentioned the original Captain Marvel a few times. I dare say we're going to look at him properly at some point in the future. Next up, Marshall Rogers and Bob Layton take over on the art duties as we catch up with Silver Surfer, who is quite appropriately in space. He's the most powerful hero, as we've said before, and he is left to take on the one and only Korvac. And Korvac has a very laid-back approach to battling, not only in the way he dresses, but that nice comfy armchair and buffet that he is resting up on. It's an interesting battle, actually, because at one point Korvac melts away the Silver Surfer's silver coating. I know what you're thinking. Am I going to cover the Korvac saga at some point? I don't know, maybe. I've got a lot of stuff to get through, and to be honest, that's not near the top of the list. By the way, they do manage to defuse the bomb. I say they because Silver Surfer directs his surfboard with Korvac on it at the bomb and gets there in time to destroy it so it doesn't go off. We assume both of them died. It seems to be the way that these battles are going. So who's next? Well, our team in the next battle is Iron Man, Mockingbird, the Black Knight and Dr Druid. Their opponents, well, who'd have thought it? Dracula is one of them. He pairs off against Dr Druid. Red Guardian takes on Mockingbird, and he states the Red Guardian would have preferred a greater challenge. Makes sense. Speaking of challenges, Iron Man has a former Herald of Galactus in Terrax the Tamer. The last pairing is the Black Knight, aka Dane Whitman, against the original Black Knight. For this whole section, I've got to say I'm not sure about the artwork. It's Jackson Guice and Kevin Nolan. Not sure, I'm not convinced. The most interesting part about this match is the heroes lose. They don't defuse the bomb and it goes off, and the Collector is thrilled to see a fifth of the universe wiped out. We have more traditional artwork for the last matchup. It's Ron Friends on breakdowns and Bob Wyacek on finishes. Our heroes for this one are Captain America, the Wasp and Wonderman. The Wasp straight away pairs off with Baron Blood, who is a Nazi vampire. That can't be a good combination. He's also the uncle of C-list superhero Spitfire. And he was killed by Captain America. Wonderman, after that bruising encounter with Thor, deserves a bit of a break. Sadly, he doesn't get it because he is paired off against Hyperion of the Squadron Sinister. As for Cap, it had to happen, didn't it? He is paired off against Bucky, who we now know didn't die. Wonderman's encounter with Hyperion has a lot to live up to when compared to the Thor match, and it doesn't quite manage it, although it's a great ending as Hyperion drives Wonderman into the heart of a nearby star. He's dead. Wasp dies as well, she is crushed, and that just leaves Captain America, who defeats Bucky, knocks him out and defuses the life bomb. We return to the original art team for the very last part of this, and speaking of returns, our surviving heroes return to face the Grandmaster and Death, who is still trapped in those energy bands. In case you haven't been keeping track, I can tell you who survived. Just two of them, Captain America and Hawkeye. If you wanted two to survive out of all of them, that's a good pair to be going with. At that point, the Grandmaster announces that round 2 is about to begin. That's right, all of that was round 1. In round 2, Hawkeye and Captain America will face off against all of those previous foes because they've all been brought back. But they will also face off against all of their recently killed comrades. Initially, Hawkeye flips at this idea, especially when he sees his dead wife in amongst the enemies. He fires off a few arrows at the Grandmaster. Of course, they have no effect. And as much as it would have been awesome to have seen Hawkeye and Cap trying to fight off all those dozens of superpowered people, Hawkeye has another idea, and he appeals to the Grandmaster's love of games and gambling. I won't tell you exactly what he does. I'll leave that for you to discover for yourselves. But let's just say he outsmarts the Grandmaster. Or you may want to call it cheating. At that point, with the Grandmaster distracted, Death breaks free from her bonds, and she banishes the Grandmaster to I don't know where. She also banishes Cap and Hawkeye to where? Back to the Houston Astrodome, where they were having their baseball game at the beginning of this whole story. Needless to say, Death has restored to life both the East Coast and, I'll tell you what, I'll say it one last time, for old time's sake. She has restored both the Ecos and the Wackos to life as a sign of gratitude for helping to free her. She's also kind of restored the Grandmaster to life, although technically she's just banished him from her realm. And everyone's there back in the Houston Astrodome. Both two teams and the Silver Surfer. And the writers just can't help themselves as they have to tease us right at the end with the possibility of the continuation of the saga.
The saga is essentially over. East and West Coast Avengers have been restored to life, and all is as it should be in Death's realm. But there still remains one big, unanswered question. What happened to Espirita? For the answer to that, I turn to Volume 3, Issue 3 of The Silver Surfer, and I do so with a heavy heart. I have to admit, The Silver Surfer was the kind of comic I only bought if the likes of Thor and Power Pack had sold out and there was nothing else left on the shelf. This particular series ended up being the Silver Surfer's most successful. It started in 1987 and after 146 issues eventually ended in 1998. Steve Engelhart, the guy who wrote the West Coast Avengers Annual, is back on writing duties for this one, and Marshall Rogers, an artist who never had any substantial runs on a title, is the man providing pencils. In fact, this title gave him his longest stint on any series, 10 issues. Okay, let's finish this.
Well, we skip page 1 because it's just a kind of title page, and the story begins on page 2, where we see the Collector, and he's been reunited with his wife Matani, who died of apathy 2 billion years ago. She's been returned to life, and the Collector states, "He did it! The Grandmaster did it! He brought you out of Death's domain." I guess he was working on that off-panel. Matani died, as I said, of apathy all that time ago, and old habits seem to die hard, because before we get to the bottom of page 3, she's died again of apathy. I think I can understand why. At that point, the Silver Surfer bursts through the side of the ship. I guess he flew there from Houston. And he says, "Collector, I've come for you." He wants answers. He wants to know what the Elders are up to. Because not only was he attacked by an Elder in issue 1 of this series, that was the Champion, but of course there's all that recent business with what happened in the West Coast Avengers Annual and the Avengers Annual. The Silver Surfer lays off of the Collector a bit though when he sees his wife in his arms and he realises what's happened, and he empathises because he has lost his own beloved, and he says, "The loss of my beloved Shalabal still haunts me." I wonder when that happened. Let's see, it says here last issue, and still haunted by it. Get over it, it's a whole issue ago. Hey, look who else is there. It's Espirita. Thank God she's okay. Actually, she explains that all this time she's been fending off the Collector with her powers of fire and light. That sounds spectacular, doesn't it? Not too spectacular not to happen off panel though, unfortunately. She still doesn't know why she died. And the Surfer now turns to the Collector and says, "Look, I'm going to get to the bottom of what's going on here. There is some bigger picture. I'm going to find out what it is. And if I find out you're involved, I'll be back and I won't be happy." To which the Collector dramatically replies, "That's fair enough." It's a bit underwhelming, isn't it? Exit the Surfer and Espirita. He is flying her back to Earth. And on their way back, they have a discussion, a deep religious discussion, about whether or not the Surfer is actually the Messiah. He states that he isn't, and any similarities in their stories is purely coincidental. Like, for example, Jesus flying around on a silver surfboard, that kind of thing. This clearly overambitious attempt at a religious discussion fizzles out with another bit of half-hearted dialogue. And that's about it. I mean, the story continues. The Kree and Skrulls make an appearance, and the Silver Surfer runs into and battles another Elder, the Runner. But the story of Contest of Champions is finally ended here. You aren't missing anything. The dialogue continues to be underwhelming, even when it's shouted. The colours are a bit heavy-handed. The Runner just looks silly. And the art in general isn't very engaging until the last few pages, especially that very last page splash. And these are the reasons why this comic was always bottom of my buying list.
Thus the curtain falls on the Contest of Champions. In 1999, Contest of Champions 2 was released, but apart from the title, that series had no connection to the original at all. In 2014, a video game was released entitled Contest of Champions, and that was inspired by the original storyline. After 2015's Secret Wars, a new 10-issue series titled Contest of Champions was released. But that isn't very retro now, is it? All in all, there are no subplots or deeper meanings to any of these comics. There's no character development or changes to continuity, but I challenge you to find a more entertaining set of comics. They were fun. The original 3-issue series was a success and proved to Marvel that limited series were viable. Now, if they could just take that concept and expand it from 3 issues to, say, 4 times that length.